recap. So one morning I woke up, cooling warning light came on. I checked the reservoir and the reservoir was completely empty. So I panicked. Although I wanted to fill it up myself, I'm like, what's the nearest thing to me? So I go to my local petrol station. They didn't have any deionized water or coolant. And then the next closest thing to that wasn't Halfords, but it was a Halfords auto center, like the one that MOT centers. And I told them, look, the reservoir is completely empty. I don't want to drive my car. I'm scared I'm going to wreck the engine. Can you guys help me out? And the guy had like what looked like red coolant mixed with oil. It was like this brown liquid that he just started pouring into my car. And it was just one of those things where it was too late to say anything. Let him do it, drove home, obviously had a massive regret. And now I'm pretty sure I confirmed there's no actual leaks in the system. So I don't have a problem with like the reservoir, the plastics being cracked, anything like that. The issue now is just the fact that that main reservoir, this one over here, it has coolant which is contaminated and I don't know what with. So we never recommend that you do a flush on your car because these systems are meant to be for the life of the engine. They're meant to be like compact, sealed systems. Although they are quite prone to having evaporation leaks from the cap. That's a common issue in a B58. Irrespective of that, you should never be completely flushing your system. You should just be topping it up. But today, we're going to attempt to flush it ourselves and then top up the coolant because I'm not happy about the fact that it's contaminated. And let me just demonstrate what I'm talking about. So in the small reservoir, which is unaffected, there's never ever any issues. You can see that it's nice and blue, it's clean. We've got no issues with this one. But if I show you guys the main reservoir, so that feeds the intercooler, and then this is the main one for the engine. You open that up, and this is after we try to like clean it as much as possible, just draining the reservoir only. You can see it's still like green. The blue's coming through. It was even more darker green than that. But yeah, I'm not happy with that. I honestly don't know what it is. I'm hoping it's not like absolutely killing my engine. I doubt it is, but that needs to come out. So guys, just as a quick reminder, if you haven't seen the previous coolant video, you can check in the top banner for what happened in part 1. But so what we're doing here is we're going to be jacking up the car. We're just looking at the profile of my tires. If you've seen our recent social media posts, I've recently put on PS5s in the rear. Again, I'm just prepping the car up for that stage 1, and we need to fix this coolant issue as a part of that because I'm not doing anything to my car until I know my car is in absolute tip-top condition. So what we're going to do is we've only got one hydraulic jack and 2 jack stands. And we need to jack up the front of the car to get to the pipe. So what I'm doing right now is the left rear jack up point. I'm using that to jack up the car, and when I can jack it up to the maximum point, I will basically place the first jack stand in the front jacking point. We couldn't put the hydraulic jack in the sort of like center part of the car. So at the front of the car and at the back of the car, you can basically use the actual sort of subframe to jack up the car, but the car was just too low, and then I have a front splitter in my car as well, so we wasn't able to put that in place. So now that I've almost jacked it up to the max, I'm just placing the jack stand towards that front jack point, just to prepare the jack stand to slot into place once I've raised the car high enough. And I always hate doing this. It's just so scary jacking up your car with like, you know, 20-pound tools from Halfords. It can be quite a scary thing. It's extremely important that you take your time and you have the right safety measures in place, because it's genuine risk to life. So I've jacked up the car high enough now. I was able to place the first jack stand on the front jacking point on the left hand side of the car. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to lower the car so I can use the jack to jack up the other side of the car, and then we can get rolling on the other parts of the video. So now I'm jacking the rear of the car, and And this is actually a mistake by me. After this, I'm going to put it back down and start jacking up the front of the car. The reason for that is the last jack stand, I want to place it in the basically just underneath the engine, just underneath the subframe, as like a full safe. Worst case scenario, something fails, that will be able to save me and my head will not get crushed. So yeah, that was off cam. I ended up jacking the front of the car. So on the right hand side front jacking point, the hydraulic jack has raised the car and we've kept it there. And then the last jack stand, we've kept it under the front subframe. And now I'm beginning to remove these very simple hex bolts. They're 8mm. There's literally like between like 14 and like 18 of these to remove the undercover panel. It's very easy. Like it's very easy for you guys to identify which bolts you need to remove the undercover. And the lighting was not like super good here, hence why we're not giving you a detailed footage of exactly where the bolts are, where we're removing them. But the first step, just to summarize, jack up the car, make sure the front is raised so you can work underneath the car. And then the second one is to remove the undercover, the front side of the undercover, so we can access the relevant coolant pipes. So I've got through like the first half of the bolts and I'm starting to see access to the relevant pipes. And now we've completely removed it. And now I'm just looking for which pipe to use. Now we've seen the diagrams and we wasn't 100% sure which pipes to use. And it became very apparent to me that I couldn't use those pipes in the middle area. Just because it wasn't really easy to get access to those big pipes. So we're actually going to go with a plan B. So after doing some digging, we identified that the best place to drain the coolant is from the on the right hand side of the car. There's the auxiliary, I think it's the auxiliary intercooler, might be butchering that name. It's under the right wheel arch, and that's what we're going to try to get access to. That's what we determine as the best point to drain from. So ideally you take off the wheel, but we didn't have a breaker bar and we didn't have the right sockets in place. We had standard sockets and I didn't want to damage any of the bolts. So what we're doing is we're just putting the steering towards the right and then removing the first few bolts of the sort of wheel lining, and then just pushing that to the side just enough for us to get access to this pipe right over here. So this is the pipe that we're going to be draining from. We're just going to remove the metal retaining clip. Just be careful. I know it looks like I'm going rough, but I'm making sure that I'm not making too much contact with the actual plastic. Don't want to crack the plastic. But this metal retainer is quite hard on there, so don't be too shy. We just need to get that off so we can disconnect that piece of pipe, and then the coolant should drain from there. And honestly, this pipe was just so hard. Again, we're working with like not garage grade tools, so I'm not in the right position to get enough leverage to take that off, but we managed to get it in the end. And now the coolant is draining. Again, at this moment in time, like I don't know if I've disconnected the right pipe and the coolant is draining from the right reservoir, because we want to drain from the main reservoir. We don't want to touch the small reservoir that goes into the intercooler, because the coolant in there is not contaminated and it's all fine. So at this moment, I've confirmed that we have removed the right one, because the coolant drained from the main reservoir, and that's the only one that we want to be touching. So open the cap, fill that up with deionized water, and now we're going to go through a bleed to get that coolant in and around the engine. If you need any information on the 3 bleeding processes for the 3 different pumps on the B58, please go in the description. I'm sure if you own a B58, you would have heard about that American dude called Kern. He's absolutely super knowledgeable on this engine. That's his video on bleeding a B58 is what I watched in order to understand how to bleed the system. So we're bleeding the car now. We've ordered some KFC. So as the bleeding system is doing its thing, we're just gonna have a snack and share some bants and then get cracking on the car again. As you can see, like the lighting, I think it's about like 3-4 p.m. It's starting to get dark. We definitely don't have too much daytime to be filming. Now for the main reservoir, there's two bleeding steps. There's basically the step where we activate the pump and we let the system do its thing. And then secondly, we just start up the car, rev it to 3000 revs a few times, and then turn off the car. So now we're doing the second step of the bleeding, where I rev it to 3000, just like once or twice, because we don't want the coolant to get so hot that it's going to burn our hands. So we activate the pump, we turn on the car, and now we're gonna, again, we haven't put the retaining clip back in yet. We just popped the pipe back in, and now we're gonna pop it back out and go for the second drain. We tried our best to not make much of a mess, but this time around, it's just so hard to get that piece of pipe off its bracket. So we made quite a bit of mess, but it is what it is. We live and learn. And it was kind of hot as well. So again, be careful to not burn yourself. So now basically it's getting dark. We're repeating the process. I think this is one of the last times we flush because of the lighting issue. It's getting dark really quickly. We completed 5 complete flushes. So repeating the process, like topping it up with deionized water, bleeding the system with the 2 methods, cracking open that pipe again, draining the fluid, and then repeating the process. We've done that 5 times. Ideally, I would have done it 2 more times, I think, just ideally. But on the last one that we did, it did start to get to the point where the liquid was becoming more and more clear. So now I'm just doing a 50-50 mix between the BMW coolant, bought it straight from BMW, and deionized water, and I'm topping the main reservoir. And again, we're going to bleed it one last time, make sure the level's all good, and then take the car for a test drive. So now I'm just putting the car down, removed all of the jack stands and the hydraulic jack, and we've also replaced the undercover tray as well and fixed up all the bolts. So we should be ready to go. So now Graciano's starting up the car. I told him whilst I'm packing, just take the car around for a spin, and here's what happened.
What's that sound? What's that sound?
Stop, don't move. Press the park.
Yeah, it's on park.
So we got gas that we finished everything 10 years later, and Graciano. So we've gotten out the car. Graciano heard some weird noises, and what happened is I left one of the jack stands on the passenger door, thinking Graciano would see it. He didn't see it for whatever reason, and he was literally he drove over it, but like he didn't drive off enough for it to cause damage. Like we got so lucky. There was no damage to the bodywork or the alloys or the under tray. He just about ran over the jack stand, and it got sort of like nudged into place, and we removed it. Again, sorry about this footage. I know you guys can't see it clearly. By this point we had already removed it. It was in that section over there. But yeah, luckily it didn't damage the car. So just make sure when you're clearing up all the tools and stuff, you've cleared it completely before driving away with your car. And now Graciano is just taking it for a spin. Heat up the car, turn the heating on, and just do that one sort of like final bleed. But over the next few days, I'm obviously checking the coolant level and topping it up if necessary. But yeah, that's pretty much the coolant flush complete. Now, one final step. This device that you can see over here is just to measure the concentration of the coolant. We obviously topped the car up with deionized water and we kept flushing it with deionized water. And the concentration mix, although we put 50-50 back in, it doesn't mean that it remains 50-50. So we just want to make sure that it's the same both in the small reservoir that we didn't touch that has OEM coolant and the main reservoir that we just filled up. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this dipstick into the small reservoir and see how many beads float. Depending on how many beads float, it determines you know, what level of protection you have with your coolant in terms of the antifreeze levels. So as you can see with the small reservoir, all of the beads are floating. What that means is there's a protection of around -40. As you can see on the actual OEM coolant bottle, it says that there's protection up to -40 degrees, hence why we're looking for all of the beads to float. So now we're going to put it in the main reservoir, and as you can see, only 2 of the beads are floating, which means that the concentration in the coolant is not strong enough. So what I'm going to do over the next few days, top it up with pure concentrate. I'm going to top it up with pure concentration of the BMW coolant, and just keep doing that every couple of days until the concentration of the coolant is where it needs to be. And then yeah, that's pretty much the last step, and that's the coolant flush complete. And I hope none of you have to ever go through this ever again. But as always, guys, thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed it and found it informative. Again, you shouldn't need to flush your coolant ever, really, ideally, with these systems. But every now and then you can get into a situation like mine where it's contaminated for one reason or another, and you have to do this flush. This would have cost a lot of money to do at the dealership. So yeah, if you're willing to get your hands dirty, you can do this within like probably about 5-6 hours, to be honest with you, because it does take quite a lot of time if you don't have the garage level of tools and have the ability to jack up your car and things like that. So yeah, guys, we'll see you in the next video where we continue to work on the M240 in preparation for a stage 1 tune. You guys are going to love it.